Is Christianity rational? Well, not if you understand what being rational is, but when it comes to the religious, you can't expect them to comprehend the concepts that they're addressing, can you? So, let's see how far off the rails they can go, coming up next. Here's a channel called Center for Philosophy of Religion, which is really just word salad for Christian apologetic rationalization. And here they try to argue that Christianity can be rational. Can be. Not is, just maybe. If you squint just right, it could be, without understanding what rationality is or the requirements to actually support your own claims. But this is religion we're talking about, and they're only trying to rationalize their way to their beliefs, not prove or even care if any of it is real. This is about to get painful, so let's get started.
The Center for Philosophy of Religion presents, Is it rational to be a Christian?
No. No, it is not. But then again, it isn't rational to be a Muslim either, or a Hindu, or a religious Jew, or a Scientologist. No religion is rational, because the definition of the word rational is in accordance with reason or logic. And all religions are based on emotion, not reason or logic. It's only the religious who desperately want to appear rational, not be rational. Just appear that way because they recognize that's something that they ought to be, even if they're not. Your desires don't mean anything. Either you act in accordance with logic and reason, or you don't. And they don't.
Harry flips a quarter, doesn't look, guesses it lands heads, and believes his own guess.
Which is irrelevant. What he believes has no bearing on what the coin actually did. It's either going to be heads or tails with a tiny possibility of landing on edge, which I think he'd obviously feel if it did. His beliefs don't impact the reality at all.
A natural response is that whereas Harry's belief might be true, it's certainly not rational.
That depends on what Harry's belief actually is. If Harry believes that it might be heads, then sure, that's rational because it could be heads. It could also be tails, but he's not saying that it absolutely is one or the other. But if Harry's belief is that it is absolutely heads, assuming he's not playing with a two-headed coin, and that he's going to stake his life and the lives of everyone he knows on that belief, then that isn't rational. Let's guess which one of those the religious actually do.
Many critics of Christianity have likewise said that whereas Christianity might well be true, it's just not rational for any of us to believe it.
Because the beliefs are not that it might be true. The beliefs are that it absolutely is, without any doubt, undeniably true. It's the formulation of the Christian beliefs that makes them irrational. I can acknowledge that Christianity might be true in some weird alternate universe, but here the evidence simply does not support the conclusion that it is actually true. Could be true is not the same as demanding that it is true. And to get from could be to is, you have to have a lot of corroboratory evidence. Not wishful thinking, not magical fantasies, but objectively verifiable evidence to support that conclusion. And Christians have none of that.
Alvin Plantinga has argued that this sort of criticism is misguided.
Sure, but he's biased toward Christianity, not toward the philosophical truth that the position requires. I really wouldn't trust Alvin Plantinga farther than I could throw him on philosophical questions about Christianity.
Unlike the coin flip case, the rationality of Christian belief cannot be so easily separated from its truth.
Which truth is that? Because that's a claim that requires objectively verifiable evidence to support. And I don't care how you spin it, you simply have none.
Plantinga's argument depends on a particular view about what it takes for a belief to be rational.
I've already presented the definition of the word, and it has nothing at all to do with what Plantinga is claiming. This is just another theistic rationalization to get from reality to their religious fantasy without having to qualify as intellectually credible. This is sad. Let's keep watching.
Plantinga thinks that whether a belief is rational need not depend on how strong the reasons or evidence for the belief happen to be. Instead, it may simply depend on how the belief was generated. A human being, like Anne, has experiences, reflects on them, and acquires beliefs about herself and her world by using memory, sense perception, introspection, reasoning, and any number of other cognitive faculties with which she is endowed.
But that doesn't mean that the conclusions she comes to are factually correct, that they are rational, unless those conclusions are actually defensible intellectually. Now, I've got no way of knowing what might be going through her theoretical head in this scenario, but if she came to the conclusion that the boy who brought her flowers likes her, that is a rational conclusion, based on the evidence at hand. Not only does it likely match her previous experiences, and I say likely because Anne is a cartoon and has no real experiences, but not only does it match her likely theoretical experiences, but also the experiences of others in her culture, the expectations and behaviors that her culture recognizes, etc. So yes, that's perfectly rational. It might be wrong, but it's approached rationally. But if Anne decided that this boy was a space alien and that the flower was actually some dangerous parasite designed to suck her brain out, that would not be rational. The mechanisms that she is using to come to that conclusion are not defensible in any rational or reasonable way. They would be a paranoid delusion, at least unless there was evidence that it was true.
Plantinga thinks that if a person's faculties are successfully designed to produce true beliefs in certain circumstances, and if they're properly functioning in those very circumstances generates a particular belief, then that belief is rational.
But that doesn't describe religion. They are not brought about by examining the available evidence intellectually and critically and coming to the most likely conclusion based on that evidence. Religion is most often stuffed into your brain before you reach the age of reason, where it takes hold like a parasite and colors the perceptions of the world around you in ways that make it doubtful if you're even capable of coming to a rational conclusion about religion anymore. It is emotional, not intellectual. It is based on feelings, not facts. And worse, it is not open to revision based on newly acquired evidence. Religion is not, this is the best supported idea I can come up with based on the currently available evidence, therefore I will accept it provisionally until something better comes along. Religion is, this is the truth forever and nothing can ever change my mind. Just ask Ken Ham.
But note, if Christianity is true, then Anne's cognitive faculties have been designed by God to produce true beliefs, rather than, for example, to produce beliefs that would make her happy or powerful, whether true or false.
That's completely indefensible. What he's doing here is asserting something that he thinks shows his beliefs to be reasonable, not rational, but reasonable, without showing his assertion has anything at all to do with reality. This is a rationalization, not being rational. In order to be rational, he would have to show that his argument is more likely to be factually true than any of the other alternatives, and not only can he not do that, he won't even try. Because with irrational people, they assume that their beliefs are right without ever bothering to prove that they're right. Flat earthers assume that the earth is flat. Then they go on to rationalize away all evidence that they're wrong. The commitment to an undemonstrated claim is paramount, based on how it makes them feel, not on what they can actually prove. The religious do not say there may be a God. They say there absolutely is a God, and it's the God I believe in, and you can't ever convince me otherwise, so there. That is not rational.
And if Christianity is true, Anne's cognitive faculties would likely include capacities for awareness of God, what theologian John Calvin called a sensus divinitatis.
Or bold rationalization, because they're just taking an idea that makes them feel good and then running around the field with it, knocking everyone else over, and pretending that they're winning. Because you notice that they start with, if Christianity is true, and then immediately shift into, because Christianity is true, and proceed from that assumption. That's not how this works.
And also for receptivity to interaction with the Holy Spirit. And if Christianity is true, Anne's belief in Christianity is quite probably the result of the proper functioning of those faculties in the very circumstances they were designed for. That is, quite probably, her belief is rational after all.
But you haven't proven that Christianity is true. If, say, Scientology is true, then everything Anne thinks is the result of evil Thetans trying to mislead her. So why should we think Christianity is more true than Scientology, or Scientology more true than Christianity? Why should we think that either of them is true at all? Because until you answer that question, you're not being rational.
But wait, Anne doesn't just get to assume Christianity is true and then use that assumption to prove her belief in Christianity is rational.
True, which I've already pointed out. But that's what the religious do, regardless of what religion you're talking about. You can't just say this could be true and then assume that it is. And up to this point, that's all this video has done. Will they turn it around? Yeah, don't hold your breath.
Right, she doesn't get to do that. But replay the video and you'll notice she's not guilty of any such thing. Plantinga doesn't maintain that his argument shows Anne's belief in Christianity is rational. Rather, it shows that if her belief is true, then it is probably rational as well.
Nope, they don't. They play word games. Because the step after, if this is true, is, here's how I prove that it's true. And the religious don't do that. They have never done that. Because unless Christianity is true in this case, the entire argument is nonsense. Because what is really being said here is that if Christianity is true, then belief in the doctrines of Christianity may be rational. May be, not are, may be. But if Christianity is not true, then the whole thing is an irrational mess. And they don't even try to determine whether Christianity is true or not. In fact, there is no real way to do so because Christianity specifically and purposely moves their imaginary friend beyond the ability to rationally evaluate him. It makes everything faith, and faith by the very definition of the word is not rational. This just doesn't get any better, does it?
Seeing the important difference between those two claims matters, and it also explains why Plantinga thinks that, unlike Harry and the coin flip case, any criticism of Anne that says her Christian belief is irrational will have to be supported by a second and independent argument against the truth of Christianity.
That would apply to any claim, though, wouldn't it? Because using that thinking, and I use that term loosely, any claim of any kind is rational if you assume that the claim is true a priori. And you notice that they try to shift the burden of proof from the person who believes to the person who does not, saying the believer doesn't have to prove their beliefs are true, the other guy has to prove them wrong. Again, that's just not how this works. But when you have an entirely rationally unsupportable idea and you're desperately looking for a way not to be laughed at by people vastly more intelligent and rational than you are, this is the kind of thinking that you get. Again, I use that term loosely. And I think they know how dumb it all is because, again, this is a religious channel that disables comments so no one can point out just how asinine and ridiculous their videos are. And this shows just how ridiculous apologists like Plantinga are, where they start with the assumption that they're right, then they try to play word games so that their preconceived notions don't look as absurd as they actually are. You can take this argument and apply it to anything. Flat earthers aren't crazy if the earth is really flat. Anti-vaxxers aren't idiots if vaccines are really dangerous. Muslim suicide bombers are just fine if Allah really wants you to murder the heretics. But you have to get from the if to the truth. And they've got no interest in that because the truth doesn't matter. Only their emotionally comforting blind faith does. And that's why none of this is rational. None at all.
Bum